Hi, welcome to the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultations Conference, Equity from the Start. My name is Beth Glicker. I work at Georgetown and I will serve as the session moderator, and I'm joined by Monique, who will be our technical host. The session's being recorded and transcription is available through the Zoom platform. And should you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time at the end to get those answered for you. That's the plan. So we're going to be quick and efficient with time, and I'm going to let the presenters go ahead and introduce themselves and get started. And I'm going to mute myself, and please remain muted throughout the presentation. Thanks.
Hello, welcome everyone. We're excited to be here from Louisiana, and I'm excited to be here with three of my colleagues. I'm going to tell you a little bit very briefly about our program just to help you orient to where we're coming from, and then I'm going to turn it over to them and they are going to share an incredible amount of wisdom with you. We come to you from Louisiana, and we are part of a statewide infant and early childhood mental health consultation program that provides consultation in childcare settings, as well as we now also do family care settings. The name of our program is TIKES, and this is our 15th year in existence. We're very excited, and we're celebrating that with our own conference for providers that we'll be having in a couple of weeks. So we are in childcare settings. That's where we provide our consultation. It's all center-based or family home-based, and any center that have children enrolled who receive assistance, childcare assistance, they're eligible to get consultation, and we prioritize centers that have lower quality scores to help them enhance their quality through mental health consultation. Each center receives visits either twice a month or 4 times a month, depending on the center size. And so if it's 8 classrooms or less, they get to see us every other week for 6 months. And if they're larger than 8 classrooms, then they get to see us every week, because when you've got that many classrooms, we really want to make sure that we are meeting with all the teachers. We are a program that provides consultation at the programmatic, class, and child level. When we go in, we provide all 3 of those services. That's what the agreement is, even though oftentimes our port of entry is because a center is struggling with a certain child or a classroom. Once a center participates in 6 months of consultation with us, they continue to get follow-up visits. They can call for booster sessions anytime they need it. And then after a year, they're eligible for a repeat session. So there's some centers we've had relationships with the whole 15 years that we've been in existence, and we've gone in and we've visited them several times with 6 months of consultation. Just let you know our learning objectives here, that we want to make sure you walk away with some inclusive strategies that you can help teachers to use to support parental engagement, especially during the pandemic. We also are going to have you walk away with some inclusive strategies around having difficult conversations with parents. Oftentimes that is the role that we are in as consultants. And then we also want you to walk away with some tips on how to promote parental engagement in any offerings that you have, or to help the center think about how they're enhancing parental engagement. And so I am finished. I'm going to pass it on to one of my colleagues here, and I'm going to let her take it away. And so this is Ginger.
Hi, I'm Ginger Highsaw. I would say good morning from Louisiana, or good afternoon wherever you are. I am a senior early childhood mental health consultant in Central Louisiana. I've been doing this work for a little over 10 years now. So we're going to be talking about, in my section, like supporting childcare centers to build relationships with parents. So next slide. So definitely, we know that it's important to engage parents from the start. And so some of this information is not necessarily new to us, but when I think about parents being a crucial piece to the health of our centers and the children that we serve, it is something that I know I have to remind myself often. Like I just remember yesterday, I was a child care center. And I would say probably almost on a daily basis in visits with centers, at least probably one teacher is going to share frustration about their perception of a parent, or the activity of a parent. And so as far as thinking about first impressions, I think that it's very important from the mental health consultation perspective that the impressions that we give, that we definitely can provide empathy to teachers when they share their frustrations. But it's also very important that we are mindful not to affirm their beliefs. It's kind of it can be a tricky line sometimes that we walk, that we provide empathy, but we don't necessarily, strongly agree, because it can affirm some viewpoints that could be negative and also create barriers in their work with parents. It's always important that we remember to show respect and to show the value that parents hold, and that they are our partners and they're not the opposition, and that we want to create bridges with parents and we don't want to create division. So we're going to share some ideas, but I think that first it's important that we consider some barriers. So next. When we consider barriers in engaging parents, I definitely think, especially when we think about COVID, and we're going to talk about some pandemic barriers, but when we think about parents that have started their children during COVID, and maybe some of them are first-time parents, and they started and they didn't even enter the center. At least in Louisiana, we had a long period of time where parents could not come in the building. And so can be definitely some unclear expectations. What is expected of parents? And even though a lot of times centers can have, guidebooks, handbooks, not everything is going to be in the handbook. And so sometimes we can have some parents that have unclear expectations. And so we need to recognize that. Definitely there could be language barriers. Sometimes the language barrier could be they're speaking a different language. Sometimes it just could be they're from another state. And sometimes, there's different language that we use, different verbiage. And so it's important to think about that. Also, something to think about is like personality differences. I know years ago I was attending something with a friend of mine, and some of her friends were there, and one of the individuals, shared frustration that she had dropped her child off at the center, and the teacher didn't speak to her. And so I think sometimes it's important for us to remember that we can have teachers that are introverts, just like I tend to be more of an extrovert. And so it's easy for me to say hello to everyone. I mean, I say hello to every cashier that checks me out, say hello, and I'll strike up conversation with, a server in a restaurant. And some people, it's just not their natural tendency to do that. And sometimes our teachers can be intimidated by some parents. And so we can be less likely to speak up if we're feeling that intimidation. So we need to sometimes consider that when we're talking with teachers. And so sometimes parents can get a different impression of a teacher just because they didn't say hello. And of course, we know sometimes teachers don't say hello because they're wrapped up. They're very busy. They have a lot of stuff going on. Most definitely, if parents are getting predominantly negative or neutral communication, that can hinder our relationships with parents. I think it's very important for parents to hear positive feedback as well. Something else to consider is that our parents are sometimes struggling parenting, and it could just be that they have one toddler, but we know a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old can give you a run for your money. And when you think about if a parent is really struggling parenting their toddler, and then they show up to drop their toddler off with a teacher who has a classroom full of toddlers that are getting along in that moment, and they're playing and everything looks wonderful, that can be very intimidating to a parent as well. And so that's something I definitely think that we have to consider, and that's something that we have to talk about with the centers that we work with as well. Parents are stressed, just like our teachers are stressed. And so sometimes we have to be the voice of the parents and communicate what they may be going through, not necessarily what we know about, but the possibility. Obviously, we know there's been pandemic barriers, parents not having access to classrooms, not knowing what they're dropping their kiddos off, what teacher, sometimes they haven't even met the teacher because the teacher may come in after they do drop off in the morning and the teacher is gone by the time they pick their kid up in the afternoon. And so that's something to think about too. And we're going to talk about some different ideas about how to handle that. Definitely making assumptions about parents, that can create some barriers. We can quickly make an assumption without knowing the full story. And so sometimes having conversations and believing the best about that parent and just getting clarity can help. Obviously, we know that there can be cultural differences. So I'll share a personal example that I have. So I grew up in Northeast Louisiana. And if you've ever been to Louisiana, Louisiana is very rich in culture in its own. Not even necessarily cultures that were recently introduced to Louisiana, but different portions of Louisiana are very culturally different. That's the beautiful thing about Louisiana. If you've never been, I encourage you to visit us. We're a wonderful state. But I remember I currently live and reside, and I've done this work in Central Louisiana. And I remember first going in centers and seeing amber teething necklaces on children's necks. And also some children would just have strings, and the strings were very close to their neck. And I was like, what? And I would talk to each other like, what in the world? What is that? It can be a very common practice. It's a belief that the string, and you'll see the knots in it, or the amber necklace can help children with teething pain. And it kind of baffled me. I had never seen it. Growing up in Northeast Louisiana, I'd never seen a baby. And I even think that's even becoming more common, the amber necklaces. I'd definitely never seen a string around a child's neck. And so I had to gain some understanding. And so it could have been very quick. And I'm sure that I entertained some ideas of, oh my goodness, these parents are crazy. But it's a cultural, very much a cultural norm in different parts of Louisiana. And so sometimes us, leaning in and finding out more information can help us in our work, and not just assuming, negative things about the parent. So let's talk about some specific ideas of how to engage parents. So next slide. So I'm sure that some of you have seen your centers or the groups that you work with do different things, but I'm going to give you some more specifics. Having an outdoor or virtual open house. And I know for me, I've done this a couple of times as the mental health consultant in some of the Head Starts that I work in. Parents still weren't able to step in the building. And so it was a large Head Start that I was working with. And I talked about, how about one day I just kind of come set up and have a table outside and have all the information about mental health consultation. I also had some handouts on some social emotional milestones. I had my business card. And so I spent pretty much all day. It was parent teacher conferences that day. And so I spent several hours outside greeting every single parent. I had candy. And with that, we do child-centered consultation in the work that we do. So if parents sign a consent form, we can do specific observation screenings, provide classroom strategies, behavioral interventions specific to that child. I had several parents ask me questions that day, sign consent forms, and we started conversations that I probably would have been not had the opportunity, or would have taken a lot longer, but just because they got to see my face and I got to introduce myself to them, it was a wonderful thing. I mean, it was just really, I ended the day and I was like, wow, this has been such a great experience. And so to me, it's something I definitely want to repeat in the future.
Those are actually my favorite, Ginger.
What's that, Tammy?
I said those are my favorite when we,
Yes.
Those are the best.
Absolutely.
Mine too, Tammy. Mine too, Ginger. Made me think of when you said the virtual open house. During COVID, there was a center, one of my centers I worked with that never had a virtual open house, not any. They're like, what, I really want to do something. Parents aren't able to come in, like you previously mentioned with COVID, right? So that was one thing I supported the center with implementing, thinking about how will we share this year with the families, what curriculum, everything you want to know, have a family know about who you are. So we did that virtual parent open house. Guys, I want to tell you, it went amazingly well. I went actually to visit the center prior to scheduling it. We met a couple of parents, and one parent was new, and I said, "Mom, how are you?" And she says, "I'm doing fine." Well, I asked her, she says, "I'm just wondering about this center." And I said, "Tell me a little bit more." She said, "I haven't been able to see the classrooms. We were at another center, but now we're here. Everyone said it's a really nice center, but I haven't been able to see the classrooms." That, like, light bulb went off. I thought, wait a minute, what can we do to encompass classrooms in this virtual open house? Went back, worked with the teacher, directors, they took pictures of the classroom, videoed it. It was amazing. Families got to watch the classrooms, the teachers on live camera. It connected them. And as Ginger said, with our program, again, it opened up opportunities because I got to tell them who I was, what we would provide, open opportunity for child-centered consultation again. Yeah, I love that outdoor and virtual.
Well, thanks, Tammy and Karen. I even know that I've had some centers that were giving like an open house tour in the evening after the center had closed.
Mhm,
The parents were masked, so that's definitely a possibility as well.
Mhm.
As far as texting and FaceTime, of course, it really depends on the center and their practices. I recall one time I was in a classroom, and parents are pretty accustomed to getting phone calls, when a kiddo is having a rough morning or a bite has happened or what have you. But one time I was in a classroom, it was a beautiful thing. The teacher, she said, that the little fella, it was a pre-K classroom, he just kind of had a rough morning all morning. And she said to him, she said, "Hey, how about we FaceTime Dad and you can chat with Dad?" And so she FaceTimed to Dad, and she just said, "I'm just going to say Billy. Billy's kind of been having a rough morning, and I think it would help him to see your face." And so they just had a little, 2-3 minute conversation, and it just brightened Billy up for the rest of the day. And so what a wonderful way to partner with a parent is through FaceTime or through text. Or also like below a childcare app where you can send pictures and things like that. One of the things that I try to promote all the time to encourage parental engagement is to do parent show and tell. And I think that this can be done in a variety of ways. It can be very typical for us to have a parent who's a firefighter or a doctor to come do show and tell, which is fun. But I think that we also need to include all parents. We need to provide the opportunity for all parents. And we know that some of our parents are unemployed. We know that some of our parents might not be considered what society views as the ideal parent to come do and show and tell. But if we believe that all parents have something to offer, I believe that parents can come do a show and tell based on a hobby. They might like to do woodworking. They may like to cook. We have parents from different cultures that could come share a recipe, share a new food with children that they've never experienced. If we have a parent who collects trash, kids love the dump truck in a classroom. So for them to come and talk about that, and then it could encompass talking about like not being a litter bug. So I believe that it's so important that we communicate to all parents that they are valued and that they could come and do show and tell. They could come read a book to the children. Just different ways that we can incorporate parents coming to the classrooms. I noticed, someone mentioned that parents can talk about their favorite toys or books. I love that. Definitely newsletters it's a great way for us to encourage communication with parents. I like the mindset of us featuring parents, featuring teachers, and sometimes maybe even like if a parent does come and have show and tell, we can take a picture of that parent and have a newsletter, whether it's a virtual newsletter or a newsletter in print. We're a big believer in having universal screening. I wish that we could incorporate it more. Once upon a time, it was something that was part of our program, and we were trying to get it back. And I believe the state of Louisiana is about to incorporate that very soon. But we do it with child-centered consultation if we think it's appropriate. And it's a way to start conversations with parents if we're having universal screenings. Also, Facebook is a great way to promote things that the kids are doing in the classroom. They can see what their kiddos are doing. But also, if we have parents that come and do show and tell, we can promote that on Facebook as well. So that is just in a nutshell some of the things that we can do to engage parents during a pandemic. So I'm going to pass it off to one of my colleagues.
Hey everyone, my name's Tammy Morlock. I'm in the Southwest Louisiana area, and I'm not as seasoned as Ginger and Karen, but I'm coming up on my second year. And I'm going to talk about initiating difficult conversations. And this goes with involvement and importance of the center staff. So basically, the presentation of our services provided by an early childhood mental health consultant is vital and has an impact. So if the staff is presenting it to the parents as clear, informative, and viewed as a support service, this could really provide a warm handoff and a great first conversation between a mental health consultant and a parent. So, you know, sometimes I know myself, I'm sure Ginger and Karen have come across this as well. There's a sense of being forced where whether, you know, the teacher is kind of unaware of the services we provide, but they know what the, you know, that we're there. And then there's high emotions and there's a child in the room with challenging behavior. They just try to push us off on the parent and they don't really describe the services too well. And then also center directors. Sometimes I've had center directors who kind of use early childhood mental health consultation as a last resort, such as, you know, you have to speak to our mental health consultant or we're going to remove your child from the center. So center staff is a doorway to the parents. Having the proper conversations with parents can really start the consultation off on the right foot and have clear intentions. Next slide, Cherry. And working with providers as well. So starting the conversations with providers, they usually come at it in kind of different ways. Usually it's scary. I don't want to bring it up to the parent. I feel like I'm crossing a boundary, just the nervousness, or a lot of times I hear they feel like they're going to offend the parent, you know, whether it's in regards to a developmental delay that they see with the child in their room or some type of challenging behavior. So a couple things that I like to do myself is kind of make it real with the providers, you know, let them know, like, you spend all this time with these children, you know, sometimes more than the parents do during the week. And you're on the front lines working. So you have direct access to the child. You get to witness the challenging behaviors or any type of behaviors. And then also you get to witness if there's, you know, some type of developmental concern that you may have. So you're an advocate for the child. And that's kind of how I like to make it real with the providers. And they kind of, I guess they kind of forget that they're important in the child's life. And it kind of lets them step back and say, you know, wow, I guess I didn't realize the role that I play in this child's life. So I like to make it real, let them know about how important referrals are, services for intervention, prevention type thing. Something else that I like to do is role playing. I know Miss Karen, she's done role playing with me and it's helped me out very well when I get nervous, but also for the teachers or any staff at the center when they go to bring up those conversations with the parents that might be difficult for them or, you know, on subjects that are difficult. I play the provider and they'll play the parent, and I like letting them come up and during that role playing, having the conversation, things that they think the parent will say that will kind of, you know, get them riled up or kind of stress them out or make them even more nervous. So we kind of go through all the if ands, what could happen, the appropriate responses, and doing role play, it relaxes them, prepares them. And one of the most important things is proper terminology, because if during that role play, it's a teachable moment, They sometimes will, when I approach parents and parents they'll come up and say, well, the teacher told me you're going to be my child's counselor. That's not what we're doing. Or they'll say something like, I hear you're going to diagnose my child. So this is a great opportunity to role play with the providers to let them know the proper terminology. Allows for clarification that we do not diagnose children. That's not part of our jobs. And this could completely just change the initial parent contact and how it plays out. Next slide, Sherry. Another thing I like to do is kind of just walk through with the provider, the 3 A's, acknowledge, ask, and adapt. Sit with the provider, recognize their feelings are involved. There might be, implicit or explicit biases towards others. They might, be angry. Find out where the anger comes from. Where are these feelings coming from? And then also with asking, collect the information. What does this mean to the family? Collecting information could be such as what could cause this behavior from happen. What could be the reason for the child to respond this way? Kind of really gets into what could be happening at home, things like that, or changes with staff. Have staff been out so much and the children's behavior is coming out? And then consider ways to adapt your program and policies, alternate approaches. This one I love because sometimes the providers don't even realize, but it's a great way to work together, that if they possibly move the child up if they're close in age to the next age group, it could be a new teacher, new environment, new children in the classroom, and just the environmental change could be a possible behavior change. So just working with that on things that they could do within their program, and then also consider the needs of other children in the center. So approach it as okay, Sherry. Approach it as a team, and kind of just wanting to collaborate together is key with the providers. Initial parent contact, emotional flooding. Parents could be worried, in denial, worried such as, what will happen to my child? What services would they need? How could my child be labeled? In denial, they could be angry that you even reached out or even brought up the subject. Uneducated about the early childhood mental health consultation, unaware of services. The terms mental health consultant really does scare parents. There's still a stigma. And then half the time I hear infants, they don't need mental health because they don't have it. So they're just uneducated sometimes. And then just not interested, or they're forced again by the center. Or they feel it's a waste of time. I don't have time to talk about this, things like that. Next. Follow the cues and clues, initial phone contact. Sorry if I'm talking fast. I know that we have to get through. Just listen to the tone of voice of the parent, listen for the responses.
Slow down. You can slow down.
Okay. Also the concerns, they have concerns of their own. Sometimes when the staff sends me to reach out to a parent, it's something the parent has a concern that we didn't even know about. So it just opens up for that different conversation, and the parent kind of doesn't even touch on what the center's concerned about, just starts for a great conversation in that way. And then in person, tone of voice, body language, refusing to sit down. I know during meetings with parents, one parent is all for it, sitting down, relaxed, ready to engage. The other parent standing up, walking around the room, using gestures, or of course, a parent could be crying. So with all this, with the cues, just leave space for participation with the parent and for yourself for providing consultation. You can offer resources, referrals. You can offer to meet with the child's teacher as a team. And then offer in-home strategies, and then, start discussing on the assessments that we provide. Another thing when you meet with parents and having difficult conversations, just check on their emotions to proceed, or instead of pushing them further away by upsetting them even more. So kind of it goes back to read the clues, and then to remind them that you're there to support them if and when they're ready. So allow them the opportunity to reach out if there are any questions or concerns later, but check in with their emotions, validate and explore their feelings, inquire, such as, what does that feel like for you? If you're witnessing less intense feelings and they're a bit calmer, start engaging and participate more. And then of course, go straight into begin collaboration talks. How can I best serve you at this time with your child? And then, of course, if you're witnessing intense feelings or just refusal, you could say things like, it sounds as if you're having strong feelings about that, but just remind the parents that early childhood mental health consultation services, they just offer support. So you could say things like, whenever you're ready, or if you have any questions or concerns at a later time, I'm here. Next. And then one takeaway I've learned being a mental health consultant is just about initiating the difficult conversations with parents. And I put it on here. It's not enough to tell our parents that we're here to support them, but we also need to put into action for them to feel it. And I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Karen.
Thank you, Tammy. My name is Karen Stevens, and I am a TYPES early childhood mental health consultant here in Louisiana, in the capital state of Baton Rouge. And I want to say thank you for taking time with us today to share information on promoting parental engagement. Next slide. We're going to be looking at building blocks of parent engagement. A lot of our conversation has been considering barriers, how we've engaged, what we've done, and I always want to start with every relationship lend to conversation. With that in mind, difficult conversations happen, right? They may happen around parent orientation, informal conversations through childcare management systems, or even in trainings and workshops. But what I want you to remember is this. As I'm going through the building blocks, keep these 3 types of conversational categories in your mind. Hold space for them. There are relationships that we choose. Those are the ones that we select, consciously accept or take on, which may be a parent selecting a center and they're in the orientation, or an informal conversation, but that's someone that they know, so they could have chose that. Then we have relationships that we encounter. They're much more broad, guys. These are the relationships that it may be just staff members who work at the same site, same center site, or same organization, or it could be people in the community that we've met. Those are the relationships we encounter, and then the ones we inherit. Now that's the largest category, right? Because they just come along with what we do as consultants in our work. Well, when you think about those particular relationships and you think about parent orientation, that for us starts at the beginning of our consultation process. We have what's called a center intake interview. So during that particular time, we're trying to find out, how are you connecting with your families? What have you done? What's worked for you? So that's where the building block of parent orientation comes in for us, because at that point, we're gathering that information to support those children and families and hold spaces for everyone in that center. Another part of our work, when we look at informal conversations, we're in communities. Some are both urban and rural. And within those communities, many times conversations are existing. And no, it's not the formal conversations. It may be through just normal drop off and pick up of their children, right? Or within the community, just the day-to-day travel within the community. But keep that in mind, again, about the relationships that you encounter versus those you choose. And as you're thinking about that, take time to ensure that as you're meeting with these families, that of course, with informal conversations, with the orientation, what are the things that we want them to know, right? What are the things that are part of this? What are policies? When we come down to childcare management systems, That is an initiative right now in our state through Louisiana Department of Education that they have launched for all early childhood providers. They've launched this initiative because one, it will help parents with ongoing communication, what's happening in the center, but it will also help these center providers with the business aspect. So I love the initiative because one, it supports our role, parent engagement, and it's a system that will allow ongoing communication with all families and improve communication and include all families with inclusive of their language, regardless, they can have that through that system. It's many different ones out there, but the centers have a whole guide where they can begin to choose and select. With parent trainings and workshops, those are things that are offered through our program as well. We offer at least 6 different trainings and workshops and topics that are ongoing through our model. But when it comes to parents, that one we can offer at least 2. Many times, some of us have done more than 2. I've done quite a bit, but what I've always done, I go back to parent orientation through that intake to begin to identify and help them create. Sometimes it's been surveys, guys. What are the things that your parents are needing? What have you found them inquiring about? And sometimes I was like, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. So just leaning in, opening up and increasing that awareness has been intentional for me to create that inclusive and anti-bias program to support them. Next slide. Parent orientation, again, it provides families with an opportunity to build partnerships. And when we think about partnerships, we say that word often, right? I want to build a partnership. I want to build a partnership. Ginger mentioned earlier, and we talked about the open house, the virtual. We're now 2 years into COVID, and we had to become very intentional about that because families were no longer walking into the centers, right? They had to trust us. And that's what partnerships is centered around, trust. So they had to know what is it that you're doing. But the key to this was flexibility, because sometimes we're hearing, as Tammy mentioned, oh, we host family events, but no one wants to come. We can't get anyone but the same people. They keep coming. The same families are showing up. We're not getting any new families. So being able to lean in and wonder what's happening that we're not reaching new families, right? What's happening that we're not building these relationships? Are we flexible? Are we offering at different times? Even as a consultant in my work, when working with parents and trying to engage to explore more of what I can do to support them, I've been flexible in our schedule. My schedule may run from 8:30 to 2:30, but there's times where in our work, we've been in the evenings, 3:30, 4 o'clock, a little bit later at the centers, accommodating families for flexibility, modeling that for that owner, director, and teacher to see that we can be flexible. Yes, transportation challenges, Ginger, that's another one. Being virtual helps support those transportation challenges. And when we look at informal conversations, they are happening every day. And something we must realize is with these informal conversations, they do support relationships with families. However, many times we're not thinking about that, right? You pass your neighbor in the community and that neighbor's child is in your classroom. When you're speaking and you're saying, hi, how is Miss Jane? Well, guess what? It's an informal conversation, but it's a great way to build a partnership. Hey, Miss Jane, come by our center. We've got some cool things you can see us do in our classroom. Great way to connect. Child care management systems, again, create opportunities for continuous parent-teacher communication. I love them. Not only that, they can chat in and send messages. They can also respond back, and all this is timely. It can happen timely. They are uploading videos, pictures, and again, with technology, getting the waivers and the consent, but it's a great way to keep ongoing communication. It's a great way to include your families.
And one thing I'll add, Karen, I know this was something that I had never done prior to COVID because I like to meet with parents actually in person. I like for them to at least see my face. And during COVID, we've utilized Zoom more. And so there, especially some parents that are like in more rural parishes. That's our version of counties. If you don't know what a parish is, that's a Louisiana county. It was hard for me to work with their schedule, their work schedule, their school schedule, to meet with them during typical business hours. And so I've met with a few parents over Zoom, so that I've been able to see their face and kind of see kind of their reactions to what I'm sharing, and vice versa.
Mhm.
So that's been a great thing.
Yes, gender. That's it. Flexibility, right? That's a part of that, being flexible. So having Zoom for us opened up all those opportunities. And that's something also too, when we're not thinking about it, but that's respect. Because you're thinking about it more than just being polite, but honoring this family to think about what are the ways that may work for them with their schedule, with their essential needs for transportation. Next slide. Putting it all together, parent trainings and workshops. Guys, I guess I'm just going to put it out there. I love doing parent trainings. Parent trainings for me have been a blast. I love promoting engagement because the expert in the child's life is the parent. So thinking about that, we are here to facilitate and support, but it's the parent who's the expert. So engaging them is significant to the work that we do as consultants. And many times parents are being included in the process. But what I found, by the time you're including the parent in the process, it's more of, I need them right now, and I need you to handle the situation. So the parent trainings are a way to get that engagement. But what I also like to do, again, going back to surveys, identify who are your parents. There's sometimes in a classroom I'm asking a teacher, so tell me a little bit about your parents. What do you know? They're like, I don't know. I think they drop them off in the morning. They pick them up, different people. So what do? What can they bring to the classroom? What talents can you use? How can we make them a part of this room? Those are things that I love to identify, because there are many talents sitting in classrooms and expertise that can be contributed to centers.
Erin, this is Beth, moderator. I just want to let you know we have about 8 minutes left.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Thank you, Ms. Beth. When you think about putting together workshops, these are just workshops that I have done. The Piece of Pizzazz, that one was done with a center, where the center supplied everything, guys. They bought vegetables, they bought the meat, they had the bread, they had it either way for the family that wanted the pizza or the family that wanted pizza with meat, with vegetarian. They were inclusive of their style. Sometimes they didn't want pizza, they wanted to do a salad. So they were able to do that. But what I did during that time, before we actually started that, I read stories about pizza to encourage literacy. So we tied it in to tie in the literacy, the social skills, the engagement. Picnic time, that was another one that I did. That one we tied in with developmental milestones and positive relationships. We had a picnic on the campus in the child care center. They had a large cafeteria area. We used that. We had families incorporate and bring their own books, their own blankets. They read stories. That was amazing. We had over, I know it was about 80 families that did that. That was the first time ever. Trunk or treat, that's another one. Now that's something here that's to our culture. Again, this trunk or treat thing, it's kind of, you may have heard it too, around a specific holiday. This holiday was centered around Halloween. Well, again, when we're planning holidays and thinking with the centers with this in mind, different cultural beliefs and perspectives, even religious perspectives around this particular event. There may be some that do not want to celebrate this or doesn't celebrate holidays. So how do we do this? What can we do that's inclusive? Or if they do not want to do that, what will we have set aside specifically for them? So those are things that's been done. The Mardi Gras shoebox float, that's another one. Here in Louisiana, we are Mardi Gras people all day long. So we had the shoebox float. They designed the Mardi Gras, but the shoebox float, thank you, Sherry. That's our shoebox float. We had that at a center. They did the parade due to COVID. They weren't coming in, right? So we took and did outdoor playground. They walked around the outdoor playground. The family stood around the gate. They waved. More than one way to do this, guys. So when you think about engaging families, I want you to keep in mind that another one I want to share with you, Painting with Parents Party. That one's pretty cool. That one is just simply my favorite store, Dollar Tree. That was just ordering canvases and paint from Dollar Tree, guys, going outside, setting up tables and easing, spacing out, and letting the parents and the children paint together. Imagine the relationship building skills, the social emotional skills that came as a result of this. The father-daughter dance, that was another one that was specifically a program that targeted fathers. But what we've since done is moved it to Dance with Me to be more inclusive of not just fathers, but everyone. Another one that we love that we often hear, Muffins with Mom, Donuts with Dad. Those are things that centers naturally gravitate to. But I want to share something that's a resource that came from Pennsylvania, their education department. I love the way they had new ideas to think of, instead of donuts with dad, donuts with grown-ups, muffins in the morning, breakfast with buddies, ways to just make it more inclusive of all families.
So Karen, we have two questions. One, which I think you sort of addressed already. What kind of parent training workshops are you doing? What curriculum are you using? But it sounds like you've got lots of things on the screen there. The other question is, what's an appropriate approach for supporting a child whose caregivers refuse supportive services? And we only have about 4 minutes. So if one of you want to try to answer that question.
Okay. A child whose caregiver. Okay. For a child whose caregiver is refusing supportive services, my approach has been to lean in and understand what is that family's hope, right? What is the hope? What is the hope that they have for their child? What is it that they would like to see happen for their child, right? Being able to consider that family's need, respect for what it is, their belief and their need. Because what I've often found is that from time to time, is it that they're not wanting the services, or is it fear? Because there could be many cultural practices that could be prohibiting that caregiver refusal of service. It could have been their experience that they've had. It could be the fear of their child being identified or labeled. Many of those fears are sitting there, but we're unable to get that from a parent if we're just like, well, they're just not wanting this. They're not gonna, I can't get them to do anything. When they really want the best for their child, but it may be those fears that they're holding in a silent place.
I was just going to add that sometimes they will refuse, but if you wait a little bit, they will reach out. A lot of times it takes a while for it to settle with them, and they'll reach out even after we finish consultation with their center. So sometimes it just takes time for it to resonate and sit with them and to think about it. But a lot of times they do end up reaching out even months later.
And I want to just, highlight too, the informal thing of just hanging around the center around the time drop off and pick up happens so that you become familiar. A lot of times as the consultant, the parents imagining that the teacher's out to get them and the teacher's imagining the parents out to get them. And we become the mediator to really help them see how each of the other really does care about the child. I remember there was one consultation we went into with a child that we really wanted the parents to have screened for ADHD. We were seeing a lot of things that were concerning us. And the dad sat through the whole thing with his arms folded and just this scowl on his face, and everybody was, in there around the table and everything. And I just, created the space to ask him his thoughts. And as we opened it up, it became that he had been labeled as a child, and it sent him on this trajectory of not being supported in school and being put in a special class that he didn't need to be put in. And so we were able to talk about kind of the changes in time around, the way ADHD is handled, but also how this screening didn't mean labeling, and how he would be involved in every step of the way, and really slowed it down. And he became a real big advocate and voice for his child, but needed to just kind of be invited to have that space to worry about.
Thank you. So thank you, Sherry. We need to close down now. I appreciate everyone's attendance. This will all be available in 2 weeks on our website. And here are their emails if you want to contact any of them. Thanks so much for your time, guys.